Treasurer. Thank you for popping straight up.
Great to be here, Leigh.
Treasurer, is this what political retreat looks like?
No, not at all. It's part of our economic plan to strengthen the foundations for our future prosperity, and it's working. It's working because we're getting the budget deficit down, we're getting back to surplus. Importantly, the economy is going to continue to grow and it's going to improve its economic growth.
Last year you were telling Australians that everybody had to make sacrifices because you had no choices but to make painful decisions. The state of the budget was that parlous, and that to do anything else would constitute intergenerational theft. This year it's time for handouts and new spending. How do you explain that about turn?
I'm sorry, there are no handouts. This is about...
A tax break is a form of handout.
Well, no, it isn't. It's actually giving Australian small businesses some of their own money back to invest in new plant and equipment that is going to create jobs.
At a time when revenue is going down.
Well, what we are trying to do, Leigh, is strengthen the Australian economy, to give people a chance to innovate, to have a go. And this is an incredibly good environment to do so when you've got official interest rates at their lowest level ever. We reduced electricity prices by getting rid of the carbon tax. Petrol prices are lower than they've been, and these are fantastic foundations for the real innovators in our economy and the real growth centres in our economy, small business, to have a go.
But Treasurer, on this point about the message you've been sending the public, since the last budget you've backflipped on numerous plans, you've dropped talk of a debt and deficit emergency, you've relied on excuses for which you pilloried your predecessor Wayne Swan. Do you accept that voters are thoroughly confused not only about what your government stands for but also about your competence?
Well, no, I think they're confused about what you're saying, because we laid the foundations at the last budget, Leigh, and we have started implementing it, and the plan is well underway. Look, we've faced incredible headwinds. I mean, the iron ore price has more than halved.
And when Wayne Swan used to say things like that, you jumped on him.
And yes, I did, because the problem was Labor locked in future growth in spending that was unsustainable. Our trajectory on spending is that it keeps coming down. And that is hugely important. That's a big difference, Leigh, is that they kept building in new spending, and they put time bombs in the budget that were unfunded.
I assure you I will take that up with Chris Bowen very shortly. Let me take you to something that's an example of what I'm talking about as to why the public might be confused, which is paid parental leave. The Coalition went to 2 elections promising a very generous scheme. The Prime Minister said it was something in which he believed passionately. It was much more generous than what's currently available. Now, not only has that policy been dropped, in the budget you're winding back the currently less generous scheme that's available to women and accusing women who've legally accessed it of double dipping and being frauds.
Well, firstly, I don't think it's fair that someone can get their private scheme paid for by their employer or being paid... Can I answer the question?
The central part of the question is it's confusing to people, isn't it, when you have one policy and you replace it with another? I'm
about to answer the question, please. And what I'm saying to you is I think it is unfair that someone can be receiving from the taxpayers a paid parental leave scheme, such as an employee of the government, and then they can go to Centrelink and get another paid parental leave scheme paid for by taxpayers. We think that double dipping is unfair. Of course, you get a minimum of $11,500. That's guaranteed if your employer does not give you that money. But if they do, then it's meant to be a safety net. It's not a salary top-up. In relation to other things, we are trying to avoid what the Labor Party always wants to do, and that is increase taxes. We are trying to avoid that because we want the Australian people to have a go.
Okay.
And we're not going to do that by borrowing money as a government and then handing out in cash to people. We're not doing that. We're giving people more of their own money back.
Speaking of borrowing money, for the past 5 years, we've heard you talk repeatedly about a budget emergency, about a crisis of debt and deficit. When you were using that language, net debt was about 12% of GDP. Under your government, it will peak at 18% of GDP the year after next. Yet now, you don't see an emergency.
Well, hang on. What about what we were left with and where it was going?
And I will take that up with Chris Bowen, but what I'm saying... It is an important point,
because
that's why I'll take it up with him. But I'm saying that you said it was an emergency when it's 12%, now it's 18%. Well, we're not hearing talk of an emergency.
We're trying to rein it back, Leigh.
Is it still an emergency?
It was going to $667 billion.
But why?
And we pulled it back. If I can answer the question, please. We pulled it back from a trajectory of $667 billion. We've reduced that by $110 billion. Most significantly, we inherited a budget that was borrowing over $130 million a day just to pay the bills. We've got that down to $96 million a day. Still more to be done. Still more to be done. But we are trying to redirect precious taxpayer money into things that are going to grow the economy and create
You've
more
not
jobs.
explained to me why there's been the change in emphasis and language.
Because we're fixing the problem.
But
Because
there's
we are
still, I
fixing
just
the
pointed
problem.
out to you that net debt is going to peak at 18% of GDP.
Because we are trying to get the deficits down, and when you get a deficit down to zero and you start running surpluses, that's when you can start paying back debt. Now, if I can just answer, the fact that we are getting the deficit down, we're reducing the size of government every year. That's hugely important, by 0.5% of GDP every year. So we reduce the size of government, we empower the size of individuals and families.
But Treasurer, on this point about the size of government, today the budget reveals the government spending as a percentage of GDP is 25.9%. That is the same as the peak of the previous Labor government spending at the height of the global financial crisis.
Not true. They got to 26%. We're getting it down.
You're at 25.9.
Well, and it's too high. I agree. And what we've had is that we had expenditure that has faced a slower growth in the economy, plus, significantly, we've faced some global headwinds. Now, what we're doing is we're focusing on how we can build export opportunities for the future. We're building new partnerships with Japan, Korea, China, India, and a range of others to give that part of the Australian economy that is the growth area, small business, the chance to start to export in the same way that the iron ore miners and others have been able to export.
Over and over again, Treasury makes statements in the budget papers such as that this level of spending highlights the need to do more to bring spending down over the medium term. It says the task of budget repair remains ongoing and more work needs to be done in future budgets to continue to build a sustainable fiscal trajectory. You've warned in the past, as everyone will remember, about taking the easy path and leaving it to future generations. You've called it intergenerational theft. Why are you giving yourself a leave pass in this budget?
Well, we're not.
Well, you're not cutting spending.
Well, I'm sorry. Compared to the mid-year update in December, every year of the forward estimates we're spending less in dollars than we were going to 6 months ago.
The forecast show...
Most importantly, if I can finish, most importantly, we are reducing spending as a percentage of GDP, we're reducing the deficits as a percentage of GDP, we're reducing the size of government as a percentage of GDP. Government now, the Australian government now has fewer employees than any other time back to 2006. So we've made decisions. I'm not suggesting for a second, that it's job finished. There's more work to be done, but we are trying to ensure the Australian economy grows and grows fast as a result of our initiatives in the budget.
Are you leaving it to a future government to have to deliver the type of budget you tried to deliver last year? Someone's going to have to do that.
We're not passing the buck. We're not passing the buck because the buck stops here. Every dollar of taxpayers' money needs to be treated as something very precious. And what we're doing, we're going after the multinationals that are not paying their fair share of tax. We're applying new tax thresholds to backpackers in Australia. We're getting rid of some of the rorts, or all the rorts that we can get rid of, in relation to various payments. But at the end of the day, we're not asking Australian families to pay more tax because we want to give them every opportunity to have a go. We want to give small business every opportunity to grow their business, to employ more people, to innovate, to invest. That's what this budget's designed to do, Leigh.
Treasurer, a final question. After last year's missteps, do you accept that this budget is make or break for you as Treasurer?
It's not about me, Leigh.
Well,
it is
you are
about
the
my
Treasurer.
country. I came into this job to make Australia better.
Treasurer.
I came into Parliament to make Australia better.
I don't doubt that, Treasurer.
But your
backbench was very unhappy with how it went last year. It was part of the reason for a leadership spill.
You can do that.
Well, that actually occurred.
Well,
it's not gossip.
You can go through all of that commentary and gossip. I'm focused on one thing, and that is building a stronger and more prosperous Australia. That is my only motivation, and that's what this budget delivers.
Treasurer, thank you very much for coming up.
Thank you, I appreciate it.